And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? By the way, that's Aramaic that's written in. So the New Testament was written in Greek. That was Aramaic. Jesus cried out. And some who stood there, when they heard him said that, this man is calling for Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and offered it to him to drink. The rest said, let him alone. See if Elijah comes to serve him. So why did Jesus cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me? This has been a question again that theologians and Christian leaders have debated over the years. Some believe that he was quoting Psalms 22:1, so you would connect that to what happens to him here. That he quoted it, so you'd go to Psalm 22:1 and you would read what happens. And there's some very powerful stuff that's there as he does that. I don't think that's what was happening. I think Psalms 22 is a prophecy of what was going to happen to Christ on the cross, and we're getting that first-person view from Psalm 22, which is an amazing thing anyway, that you're getting a first-person account of a crucifixion, because you don't survive crucifixion. But there's a first-person account of it in Psalms 22, and this is what Jesus quotes. But I think that Jesus was going into shock. He had been beaten all night. He'd been scourged, which some people did not survive. The loss of blood would have been tremendous. And along with that, his body going into shock, and I think he was going into shock. And I'm no medical expert, right? So if you're here and you're in the medical field, just be a little gracious with me if I explain shock wrong, all right? Because I looked it up today and I thought, this is more complicated than I thought. So what happens with shock, as far as I understand it, is that when you get to a point where you've lost a lot of blood or an injury, and a mental shock is a little bit different. You can have an emotional or mental shock as well when something happens. But this is if you're injured bodily and you've lost blood, that your body immediately tries to conserve your major organs, your heart, your lungs, that which you need to live. And so it constricts the blood flow from around the perimeter of your body. And because of that, your brain lacks some blood flow and you get foggy. Now, when you're injured, you go into shock and you're dying, this can be somewhat of a blessing if you're dying, because it takes away the harshness of the reality when your mind kind of fades away. But Jesus, I think, went into shock and suddenly thought, why have you forsaken me? Why am I here? It speaks of his humanity, that there's Jesus in his divinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, three in persons, one in essence, and the Son now hanging on the cross in all of his divinity. None of it has gone away. Not even when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? The wrath of God is on him, but the divinity of the Son is intact. He never stopped being the Son, God the Son. He remained God the Son. And so while he's hanging there on the cross, he suddenly senses that separation. One artist put it this way, the Father turned his face away. I don't know if that's a good description of what was happening exactly when Jesus became sin, took our sin, and felt a distance from the Father. Maybe it's as simple as this. When we sin, we feel at a distance from him. We feel compelled to go to him and say, God, forgive me. I'm sorry, so that we can be reunited. But in fact, when I sin, have I been separated from God who saved me and died for me? I hadn't lost my salvation, so God was still with me, but I certainly felt a distance from him because of my sin. Maybe you've experienced the same thing. In fact, I think if you're honest, you have. And maybe that's as simple as what he was going through. That he's thinking, my God, but why have you forsaken me? He's just in the midst of this. He's human. This is his humanity. It's speaking of his humanity. That Jesus literally became a man to go through these things with us. Listen to what he says in Psalms 22, 21 through 22. Save me from the lion's mouth and from the horns of the wild oxen. And if I were in charge of the layout, of scriptures in a version of the Bible, I'd put a hard stop there. Right in that part of the verse. Save me from the lion's mouth and from the horns of the wild oxen. Then the next thing it says is, you have answered me. I'd put that on a line by itself. And then he goes on to say, this is the person being crucified, I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. So you see what happens there in Psalms 22? He's going through everything up until verse 22. He's going through everything he's going through. You can go and you can read it yourself. But at the end of verse 22, he says, you have answered me. When he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Through the course of what he's going through, Jesus now has revealed why he's going through it. You've answered me. And the next line, I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. Why am I going through this? Because I'm doing it for Israel. Now, if you continue to read Psalms 22, you see that he also talks about Gentiles, and I will go to the nations. And then he talks about a people who have not yet been born. Jesus was thinking of the Jewish people who would be forgiven by what he did on the cross, the Gentiles who would be forgiven by what he did on the cross, and you and me, a people not yet born, it says in the end of Psalms 22, that he has done this, that God has saved all of these people through the work of what Jesus went through at the cross. So why did he cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Because he felt forsaken. If Jesus cried out to God, then you can too. When you feel like you're frustrated or confused or you don't know why things are happening, you can call out to him. Now there's some respect here. He doesn't lose respect when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? He calls him his God twice. My God, why have you forsaken me? We can be respectful in pouring our hearts out to God, but God's big enough to take what we say to him, and God could answer you in the same way he answered Jesus. It's a prayer. Jesus said, if you pray, God said, call out to me and I will answer you.